The Packers just got a double dose of good news that we will talk about in this video. First, I would love for you guys to leave your comments, either, neither, or both, when it comes to the Packers picking up fifth-year options on their 2022 first-round picks, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker. Neither player has really met the expectations of a first-round pick, but they've been solid contributors overall, even while missing the final three games of the regular seasons. Quay Walker still led the team with 102 tackles and was second with 9 tackles for loss. He tapped the 100 tackle mark in each of the 3 seasons he's been in Green Bay. The price tag, if the Packers would have picked up the fifth-year option last year, would have been about $14.48 million. For Devontae Wyatt, he's had about 10.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. Last year, the price tag, if they would have picked up the fifth-year option, would have been about $11.7 million. Obviously, that price tag has gone up. So leave your comments. Let me know your thoughts there. Should the Packers pick up either, neither, or both when it comes to fifth-year options? Okay, so when we start talking about a double dose of good news for the Green Bay Packers, well, part of the double dose is that the Packers have a lot of cap space. Okay. So, in fact, the last time the Packers have had this much cap space in the offseason, they signed both Smith brothers, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and then they went out and signed Adrian Amos. Okay. So the Packers cap space is looking really good. In fact, 2 years ago, the Packers burned through about $40 million of dead cap money towards Aaron Rodgers' contract. And then last year, $30 million went to David Bakhtiari and Aaron Jones. They only have about $18 million in dead money heading into 2025. So that's looking quite good for the Green Bay Packers overall trajectory. As it stands right now for the cap space, they are around $38.03 million projected cap space for them heading into 2025. That's 12th most in the entire NFL. Unfortunately for them, that ranks 4th most in the NFC North. The Minnesota Vikings have the first most with $57.29 million to spend. The Bears right behind them at $54 million, and then the Lions have $46 million. Okay, so when we start looking at the free agents for the Packers to kind of spend some money at in-house. Okay, so let's look at who are free agents for the Packers. Unrestricted free agents are Zane Anderson, Corey Ballantyne, Tyler Davis, Andre Dillard, AJ Dillon, Isaiah McDuffie, Brandon McManus, Josh Myers, Robert Rochelle, TJ Slayton, Eric Stokes, Eric Wilson, and then restricted is John Fitzpatrick, and then they have some exclusive rights with Bo Melton, Aaron Mosby, Kadeem Tolfert, Emmanuel Wilson, guys like that. Okay, so if I'm looking at this list and I'm looking at the unrestricted free agents for the Packers, there's not any guy, for the most part, that's standing out to me like, oh my gosh, the Packers have got to re-sign this guy. They got to throw some money at him. Brandon McManus is probably number 1 on that list. And if I had some honorable mentions, it would be TJ Slayton and maybe Josh Myers. That's a hard pill to swallow because at the beginning of the season, Josh Myers was one of those non-fan favorites, but when he was out, he was sorely missed because the Packers don't have another center to step up. In fact, they looked so poor at the center position anytime he was missing. So the Packers may want to look at maybe restructuring, not restructuring, but signing him for cheaps if they're able to, or just seeing what Monk is able to do at the center position, or maybe even moving around some guys. So that being said, if you're looking at this list, leave your comments too. Who are those must signs for you? Number 1 on the list for me would be Brandon McManus. Okay, so that's a look at that. So for the Packers restructuring of some deals, it's looking quite good for them overall, all things considered. In the cap space, double dose of good news for the Packers is that they can create even more cap space. Okay, so right now, as it stands, they got about $38 million in cap space. The Packers could an additional roughly $55 million with some simple contract restructures and turning some base salaries or even roster bonuses into some signing bonuses, which would prorate over the life of the contract. It's kind of using a credit card type of approach, but that would create an additional $55 million in cap space. For instance, Xavier McKinney is due about $8.5 million roster bonus. With pushing of a few buttons of the keyboard, that can be turned into signing bonus, which would create about $5.67 million of cap space. going into this upcoming season in addition. So that means the Packers would have a total of about $93 million in cap space, which is absolutely enormous. Okay. So why is that? And who could they maybe restructure a deal with? Well, the one that makes the most logical sense is Jaire Alexander. Okay, so Jaire is due a lot of money, and there are going to be some other solutions than outright cutting him. They could restructure a deal, they could trade him, but a pre June 1st would save the Packers organization about $7.3 million of cap space. A post June 1st would create $17.5 million of additional cap space for the Packers. Neither is a probable, great solution for the Packers because Jaire Alexander, when that dude is out on the football field, his presence is certainly needed out there. In fact, we went through some stats earlier in the season of just how important Jaire Alexander is to Jeff Hafley's defense. Their defense is dramatically better out there, and they don't have a cornerback as it stands right now. That is their number one need this offseason, is getting a corner. You have one in-house in Jaire Alexander. Unfortunately for him, he's missed 10 plus games of 3 of the last 4 seasons. That's just not going to cut it. In fact, this year he didn't play in either matchup against Minnesota or Detroit, who finished above them in the standings in the NFC North, and that's just not going to cut it. In fact, he hasn't played against Detroit since 2022. And to me, if I'm looking at the books, I love Jaire Alexander. I absolutely do. I think he's such a talented, good player. In fact, I think he's one of the better corners in the league. But if he's not out there and he's only playing about 30% of the time, it's really a moot point for me. You got to cut him. Honestly, I think I would rather cut him and get the cap space rather than trading him, because I don't think his trade value is going to be off the charts given the fact that he's missed so much time over the last 4 seasons. That's my take on that. Okay, so if you look at what Brian Gutekunst did this last off season, he went out and made a few big splashes. Again, I've been saying it over and over again, but you look at the year Xavier McKinney had. This dude was an absolute animal. He had a sack, 56 solo tackles, and 8 interceptions. That's one of the moves that Brian Gutekunst did with fewer cap space dollars. Same thing with going and getting Josh Jacobs. That dude ran for nearly 1,400 yards. He had 15 touchdowns. He found the end zone so many times. His work ethic, his hunger for the game is just, you can't put a price tag on that. So I'm eager and curious to see how Brian Gutekunst approaches this offseason. I know with the absence of Christian Watson, we're going to probably need some wide receiver help. I know I did a video yesterday about that and some of the big name free agent wide receivers and who maybe makes the most sense. I know they're going to need some cornerback help with or without Jaire Alexander, whether they're able to restructure a deal there with him or not remains to be seen. Leave your comments, and as always, go Pack Go.